Hello there. My name is Marco Angeles, and this is my oral report for Drama 30. For this assignment, I wanted to do it on someone in my family, someone who's been there for me since the very beginning, 24 years, almost 25 years to be exact, and that is my mother. She's, one of a kind person. She's been there through it. Um, she's the definition of started from the bottom and now we're here. She is the American dream type story. My mom was born Guadalupe Carvajal on October 24th, 1969, in Melchor Mexico. Um, I want to say it's roughly around half an hour from Mexico City. She is the second oldest of 8 children. Um, my grandparents named her that simply because back then naming your children was based on the calendar. So her day happened to fall on the 24th of October, which landed on her middle name. She often doesn't like to reference it, but it is Guadalupe Rafaela. So they decided to name her that. All of my aunts and uncles were named after the days they were born. Luckily, that is not the case for me and my 2 sisters. So I'm very, very fortunate to have that not be part of my culture and my upbringing. My mom was a very studious individual. She went to school, also went to work, and also managed the household with my grandma. She would take care of her younger siblings, as well as do her own chores, such as do laundry, um, help her on the house, cook, do grocery shopping back when she was growing up, and also take care of my younger aunts and uncles. Her upbringing was very unorthodox, something we really don't see in today's society. Most of the time, she was never really out and about. My grandparents were really strict on my mom and my other oldest aunt, especially since because they were the oldest, they wanted them to set the example for the others. So typically, my mom was very limited on what she could do, something that she doesn't have on us, but she often reminds us that, in order to go out, one has to do chores or, like all those Latino memes that we see nowadays. Um, my mom was studying to become an accountant. She actually did graduate from that, but like many people before her and many people who are still crossing now, her upbringing in Mexico were really tough. It was really hard to find work. It was really hard to make a living. So my mom decided to make the daring journey from Mexico up to the United States to meet up with friends from her pueblo that told her, hey, like, we're making really good money here. Why not make the trip up here, work, and if you like it, stay, and if you don't, you can go back. Crazy story from that is my mom, she made that decision without letting my grandparents know. The only one who knew was my grandma. My grandpa was left out in the blue. My grandpa was the one who didn't know. So, from what I heard, um, that was the case. My grandma knew, my grandpa didn't. My mom made the journey up from Machorocampo to Tijuana in August of 1989. She crossed from Tijuana into Los Angeles. From Los Angeles, she went up to San Jose, California, and that is where she met my dad. Um, they dated for a while. It wasn't until a year or two after is when they decided to live together, and from that, my oldest sibling was born. My parents didn't marry right away, but they've been together ever since. Their relationship is strong. They have their ups and downs, but most of the time they really do care for one another. It wasn't until 3 years ago, when my dad was in the process of completing his residency for the United States, is when they decided to get married civilly. There's been talk here or there about getting married through church, but as of now, nothing has come of that. I wouldn't be surprised, later on, if they decided to do that. Growing up for my mom, culture-wise, holidays, birthdays were always celebrated. Christmas was a big thing. Back then, they would have their posadas, they would have their purisimas, they would have all that stuff during December. Something that my parents also love to bring up is posadas, purisimas, all that stuff. They would describe how Mexico would be during this time, especially right now in December. Every day would be something new. Every day they would have a party celebrating, God and the church and everything like that at every single house in their neighborhood. Another important holiday would be Los Tres Reyes Magos, otherwise known as the Three Kings Day. For them, it's always been about La Rosca and the baby Jesus and all that stuff. It's been adopted here, but like my parents have told me, my mom especially, it is often more bigger holiday back in Mexico, as kids often leave their shoes outside. It's the equivalent of children here awaiting Santa. Point taken. My mom grew up in a household that often wasn't fair and justified. Often, back in the day, the favorites were often the sons. But my mom was the one who would do most of the work. She would mop, sweep, clean, feed my younger aunts and uncles. She would often find herself doing everything along with my grandma. As my grandma would often say, prepárate ya para que en el futuro no sufres, no, para que ya sepas hacer todo. In translation, know how to do this now, so later on you're able to do this with no doubts, no nothing. For that, it is often brought down to us, especially me, being the only boy in the family. My mom brought it up that I should be the one, along with my siblings, to share the chores, share these traditions, share, that just because I'm a guy, that it is not okay for me to not do chores. My role in the house is the same as the girls in the house. Something that she wanted to bring up. She's often the one who's often done, all that stuff. It wasn't until this year was when she was able to return to Mexico after 27 years. She was able to finally see her dad, otherwise known as my grandpa, for the first time in 27 years, and finally explain why she made the move to the United States, not only for her, but for a better life. I was fortunate enough to make this trip along with her. It was very surreal to see my mom and my grandparents in the same room. This was the first time for me to visit them, to know them, and to know my aunts and uncles. And I could tell that my mom was the one that had the most personality, that was the one who was most ambitious, the one who was always thinking outside the box. And I think that represents me as well as my other siblings. We often are the intuitive ones, the go-getters, the ones who often are told no, but we often think of the next best thing. We don't stick around. We're not conformist. We go on and we do different things to pursue our dreams. And that's something that my mom has instilled in us ever since we were kids, to always go after our dreams, to always go for it, to always do everything that we possibly can to do better than my mom, to do better than my dad, to do better than both of them. They instill that in me. They instill that in my siblings. And I often find myself very proud that, that my parents believe in my education, that they believe in this, they believe in that. They believe in hard work and sacrifice. They have the work hard now, play later type attitude. that's something that they hold so dearly. And for that, I decided to interview my mom. It is often known that my mom is very, very, what can you call it? Very smart. She's very smart. She's everything, honestly. My mom has gone through so much in her, 50 years of life. And I think one of the best things that I have is the traditions that she's brought up in me, so that I can bring it up with my own kids, and their kids can bring it up with their own kids, and so forth and so on. I learned a lot with this interview, not only from my mom's upbringing, but also from when she met my dad. Because often in Latino cultures, it's often known that Latino parents don't often have a lot of fond memories of meeting their significant other. I'm not sure if it's just my family, but it's often known as that. So it was very important for me to know how they met, how they came to be, how they ended up being together. So yeah, for that I'm very grateful. And just knowing more about my mom. Often I don't know the whole picture, because there's some things that parents don't like to open up about. But it was really good to see my mom be open and be receptive of this interview. And I'm really glad that I was able to interview her in this project. So with that being said, this is my interview, my oral presentation for Drama 30. Sorry it went over 8 minutes, but I just had a lot to say. I'm very thankful for my mom for doing this interview. I know it was important for her to get this project done. So shout out to her. And then that is basically it. That is my oral presentation for Drama 30. Thank you. And sorry for the bad lighting. This was the only time I had to do this project. So apologies for that. Thank you.